What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is the Race Day Rundown.
We're at Las Vegas Motor Speedway this week. I'm really excited. There's snow in the desert. There's a lot of things happening already. Kyle Busch is starting in the back. But before we get underway, let's get in with the free DraftKings contest. You can join in our league. Just drop your DraftKings tag below in the comments, and I'll send you an invite. You'll be in there for the weekly contest. We have a lot of fun there every week. I'm really excited about this race, Jeremy, because last week, really, like we talked about, was the start of the season. We saw a lot of these teams, how they got to strategize a little bit. We saw a little bit of the cards laid down on the table. We're in Vegas this week. See how many of these teams roll a dice and get things really underway this week.
It's definitely going to be a lot of fun. The truck race was already good. Xfinity race was good. If we can get a race that's anywhere close to Auto Club last week, we're definitely going to have a good race here. I don't know if the one thing I'm a little bit worried about is there's not as much tire fall off, so I don't know if we're going to start seeing a little bit more of the guys getting lapped. But in practice and qualifying, the lap times are so close together. I don't know. This might be a fight the whole time. I think multiple lead changes are at hand here. I think it's going to be a wild, fun ride. But you're right. We're finally getting some good data. We're going to start seeing what these guys can do. And already, if this continues for the rest of the season, the parity already is crazy. The only driver to have two top 10 finishes in the two races is one of the worst drivers from last year, Eric Almirola. Dude's been on fire. He's been starting 30th and still getting up there and placing top 10s. This is really shaking a lot of stuff up. We got a lot to get to. Let's set the stage for Las Vegas. It's a 400-mile event. That means there's 267 laps, mile-and-a-half track. Some would say kind of cookie-cutter track, but I don't think that you could really say that about Las Vegas. There's a lot of bumps. I want to pause real quick. During the truck race, I had never thought about this until Kurt Busch said this, Las Vegas native, hometown kid. He said that obviously with the thinner air being in the desert, they don't create as much horsepower. That makes sense. But the other thing that they don't do is they don't create as much downforce because the air is not as dense. So you're down on power and you're down on downforce. So this track does race unique compared to other mile-and-a-halves that you might get at like Texas or Charlotte, where you're a little bit closer to sea level, where you get that denser air, you get more horsepower and all that stuff. So it's going to be fun. There's 186.9 potential performance points up for grabs, so dominators are definitely going to need to be in your lineups. I would expect 2 to 3 potentially. We'll get into that. Stages, 85, 80, and 102. The last time we were here in the playoffs, Denny Hamlin won. Where do you want to start? Because there's so much, I think, to kind of unpack from last week, what we got going on this week. Where do you kind of want to start, Joe?
I think you really touched on it, the parity. I think the parity across the board this year, we get to see qualifying, we get to see practice. Not everybody's running the same practice time frames where there's some guys out there running 5 laps. There's other guys running 25 laps. So you can't do a complete analysis based on lap times, but we do get to witness the cars on the track before they get out there for the race. So that is a big advantage over last year. And I think last week we saw, like we talked about a lot last year in most of our podcasts when we were talking about the next-gen car, how it was supposed to bring this parity to the sport, allow these smaller teams to be competitive. And we saw that last week. Ricky Stenhouse was up there for a lot of it. Eric Jones was leading a majority of that race with Tyler Reddick. So you have a lot of these smaller teams that traditionally haven't been always competitive leading laps. They've been there in the top.
Suarez fourth.
Yeah, they had top 10 finishes, but they weren't leading laps. This year, we've already seen them do that, so we'll see how long that lasts. They might have an advantage early, but then these larger teams like Penske, we've already seen them be really fast this week. There's a lot of stuff still to be playing out, but another week, another data pool. I'm excited to see how this mile-and-a-half plays out.
Well, it's interesting because I think Penske's look good in every event we've been to, including the Clash. with at least one or more drivers. Hendrick has looked good, I think, in every event, at least one or more drivers. Penske's got a win. Hendrick's got a win already. So the top teams are still doing what they do. But the parity throughout the rest of the field, the top 10, like I said, the only repeat top 10 guy, and I get it's just 2 races, and one of those races is Daytona, which is always crazy. But Eric Almirola, who was just garbage last year, the whole team, Stuart Haas, but we see Chase Briscoe get up there and lead laps last week. Cole Custer has looked really good. Harvick finally made a run late. I mean, he was kind of hanging out towards the back for most of the race, and then the closer definitely closed last week. He was one of our checkers, and he definitely delivered on the value last week. So we got that one right. But the point is, you said these guys that just aren't normally up there consistently, they're running up front. It's going to be really fun to see how the rest of the season unfolds. I do expect the bigger teams to start to widen that gap a little bit. They'll start figuring out some of these advantages. There are a few things that NASCAR has to work on. I think the tire situation currently is definitely an issue. You can't have guys getting a flat tire on track and not making it back because they're essentially high-centered, though.
You know, it's the most frustrating part about it is last year Christopher Bell was in a position in most of the race last week to really pay dividends, and he gets a flat tire. He doesn't hit the wall. He's in a position to really get back on track and really be in the situation to still make it a beneficial day for you. And instead, he ends up 6 laps down because he's, like you said, high-centered on the track, can't get any momentum. They have to come out and hook him up, and then it's a long journey around that track.
He went like 4, 5, 6 laps down. You can't have that.
And that's happening weekly. And I know that's been the hot-button topic, and it's not going to have an issue, or this issue is not going to be resolved immediately, but I think there has to be something done to make that advantage or the competitive advantage that some of these people are looking for. It's not going to be there. I'm excited to see kind of how NASCAR comes up with a resolution for this.
Well, and it's not like, okay, if a guy goes multiple laps down because he backed his car into the wall, he still can go, but he's got damage and it takes him longer to get around. That's one thing, but we're talking about simple tire issues going down, which is always been part of the sport. You should not go 4 or 5 laps down just because a tire went down. They will figure that out. I hope it's sooner rather than later because, like you said, like Christopher Bell was looking good, so good that he earned the pole for the Vegas race. He's been a little hard to figure out with this new car. At times he looks great, at times he's spinning out, getting into pit road, so who knows what we're going to see this week with him. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but I really do like what I'm seeing. I was definitely a little bit skeptical because of all the hype going into the season. It was like, what are we really going to get from this car? But so far it's been great. I hope it continues because, man, if it continues the way it's gone so far, we did our projections earlier. I think this week is as wide open as any. I think literally there is no driver off the board. You can build whatever lineup you want. I don't think you have to worry about salary because I think everyone is truly in play for different reasons. So now you have to start strategizing, which we're going to get into. But I like what I've seen so far, man. It's been really good.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to build lineups. We've already built a couple to try to get a feel for how these structures will play out because this track – you really need clean air. There's going to be some long green flag runs if we can keep it clean. I think this is going to be fun to build because I think the lineups that you have to be dominator-centric because there are a lot of laps here and performance points are going to be a key in being having a nice lineup at the end of the day. But you also need the strong finishing position, place differential. So having that right mix, how are you going to approach it this week?
Well, I want to back up real quick because there's one point that I just wanted to touch on, mainly because I haven't even talked to you about this, and this has been one of the biggest topics all week. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up now is because I'm curious if you think this is going to play into how this race unfolds. And then we'll kind of get into a little bit more strategy and definitely talk about the drivers. But the top 2 drivers are who I want to talk about right off the bat. Last week, we saw the champion win the first race, his first race of the season. I doubt it's his last. He was in second, trying to make a pass on Logano, washes up the track or something, and his teammate, Chase Elliott, the most popular driver, he put him in the wall, took him out of the race. After he had already had issues earlier in the race and had gone laps down, made his way back up, he was in contention, looked like he was at least top 3 car for sure. How did you see that? Because obviously Chase was very upset on the radio. In fact, when Kyle Larson came back to lap him, we saw him kind of do a little swerving in front of him. Don't know what all that's about. Do you think this Larson Elliott, first of all, do you think it's anything? And if you do think it's anything, do you think it's going to play into any of this racing at all? Because I think both these guys, based on practice and qualifying, they got good cars and they may be next to each other a lot.
Oh, I think they're going to be the 2 of the key factors in this race, but I don't know if we get immediate retaliation or if there is any sort of retaliation there. I know Mr. Hendrick has had some words to say to both of these drivers, I'm sure. He just locked up Chase Elliott to a long-term contract. It's an issue because do you put
that on the spotter, Kyle Larson's spotter, because he came out and basically owned it. Larson has kind of deflected to his spotter, but at the end of the day, you're the driver. You are responsible for where that car goes. Well, where are you kind of at on that?
He's thrown the spotter under the bus a couple times already this season.
Yep.
He's done it not only this week, but earlier at the Clash whenever him and Haley got into the mix. So either the spotter needs to go or there's some other issue with a little attitude. I don't know what the problem is. I think, to me, it's not a big deal. I personally, whenever I saw it, I thought initially he just didn't see him. He was racing the other guy and just forgot about Chase. Chase got an opportunity to make the pass, and the door closed a lot quicker than it should have. But
do you think that's because of the new car and they're just not aware of the closing speeds, or do you just think that he just had a complete lack of awareness and was too focused on Logano? Because I think if that's the case, like, if he sees Chase out and he's trying to make the block and he misjudges because the car, we already heard Logano talk about it in the Clash, that the cars, they close at a different rate. Like, it's way quicker than the last gen car. Okay, that's one thing. You're learning the new, the points on your car where you're at. You're learning the closing rates. Okay, that makes sense. But if you have a complete lack of awareness for this outside lane and knowing throughout the whole race that cars have been going 2, 3, 4 wide for the lead, I don't know. I kind of want to say I got to put a little bit more on Kyle Larson in this. I don't want to throw his spotter under the bus, but that's kind of where I'm at. Or do you see it differently? I mean,
well, I can see 100% that perspective because the dude races like 30 dirt races a year without a spotter.
Yep.
So he continues to have the ability to make decisions. And, man, it's just early in the season for this. I think it's going to be something we won't really have to worry about throughout the extent of the season. I'm not looking for anything to come out this week, regardless of what happened earlier between the two. So I think it's an issue that may arise later on in the season whenever things get a little bit heated come playoff time. We'll find out, but yeah, it would definitely had the headlines this week.
He's been in the headlines quite a bit the last few months. That's Chase Elliott. Usually pretty good to be in the headlines, even if it is good or bad. It just kind of makes you also wonder, too. I mean, I think before Larson came in last year, Elliott was definitely the top dog. And then Larson and his championship run had a much more dominant performance than Chase Elliott had in his championship run. Kind of wonder if maybe there's a little ego going on there too with Chase Elliott trying to have to share the spotlight.
Don't forget, going into the Las Vegas race last year, they were dogging Kyle Larson for not winning a mile on a 1.5 mile track. He won 4 out of 9 last year on 1.5 miles and won the championship. So the guy is going to get the job done. It doesn't matter what obstacles are in front of him. I think he's golden.
All right, so since we talked about them, they're in very similar spots this week. getting back to kind of your earlier question, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really decided which all contests I'm going to play in, how heavy I'm going to go, because we talked about it in one of the first episodes. Kind of plan on going a little lighter earlier on in this year until we can get a few more data points. Take some chances when we can, because obviously everyone's in the same boat. So you want to, give yourself a chance. But I like to have a little bit more data, and some of the guys that I thought would do better have not, for usually no faults of their own, just other people's accidents. Guys I thought would perform a little bit more like last year have way outperformed those. So I'm kind of hanging back with my entries into DraftKings and different contests. I will be definitely heavy on Prize Picks this week. I've liked some of their lines already. But I think you're going to definitely need, for sure, one nominator, but I think you're going to need two guys. You need some PD or track position guys that can get these fastest laps, guys like Larson, Elliott, Logano, Blaney, etc. But you're going to need some PD guys to really round out your lineups. So I think probably a two-dom build with one cheap guy and 3 PD is probably going to be how you're going to cash most contests, but you're going to have to definitely get a little bit different than that in these bigger tournaments.
Yeah, and there's going to be some chalk plays, if you will, with Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, two really good mile-and-a-half racetrack drivers that are having to start towards the rear. Kyle Busch is going to that backup car, and then Kevin Harvick just didn't have a great qualifying run. So both of those guys that are traditionally in the mix will have some place differential. So there's going to be a lot to talk about, and we'll get into that and give everybody our impact scores. If you want to dive into this, I think we can start talking about some of these drivers.
Yeah, so obviously we're going to talk about Larson and Elliott up front because they are the top of the salary board, according to DraftKings. But yeah, we give all these drivers a rating between 1 and 10. 10 obviously being really good. Like, you could pretty much play them in whether it's cash or tournament, contest. They're just good almost anywhere. Those are going to get the higher scores. Guys that we're a little bit more iffy on, obviously that's going to be around a 5 or a 6. And then guys we're not interested in are going to be below 5s. The 200 guys, we've talked about them a lot already. We're at 9s across the board on all of them. I think they're similar plays. Larson comes in at 10-3 or 11-3. He is the most expensive driver. He is second. He just lost out on the pole to Christopher Bell, who had a great qualifying run all the way around. I don't know what we're going to get out of Christopher Bell, which makes it a little bit tough, but I would be very surprised if Larson is not able to get out front and lead laps. But what I'm curious, based on last week, we saw him win, but we did not ever see him stretch that lead out like we saw last year. If that's the case, we may not see as many like these guys who just go out and lead 150 laps and, crush all lineups that don't have them. We may see a little bit more passing throughout these green flag runs. I don't know. I'm really excited to see it. We saw it a little bit in the Xfinity race. Just because you're out front doesn't mean that you're immune from getting passed. So 9s for Larson, 9s for Elliott. Did you want to talk any more about them? Because obviously we've filled up a lot of the show about these guys already.
I think we've talked a lot about them. I think they're going to have huge impacts. They both kind of are in similar positions where they can be in a dominator role. But there's other guys this week I feel that have advantages over them because of where their starting positions are. Even though clean air is king, you can still make some passing. You can do some 2-3 wide racing in some of these situations. So there are opportunities.
Are you interested in any team stacks? Because I'm leaning personally, because the next two guys are Penske guys. I'm leaning a little bit more Penske at this track, this race for me personally. Would you consider Larson Elliott stacks with maybe some other guys, obviously PD guys down below, and maybe some Logano Blaney stacks, or are you going to kind of mix it up?
I'll probably mix it up a little bit more than having a team stack. I think that you can approach it that way and into some tournament plays. But yeah, Joey Logano, I think, finds a way to have an opportunity to have value because starting 6th, he doesn't have very much many cars to pass before he is up there leading some of this race, and he's just one of those guys that you can consistently count on to lead laps in these kind of races. I think he's somebody that you can feel confident in and be a dominator in this race. I gave him a 9.
I'm at a 9 as well. I like Logano a lot, but I think I might even like Logano a little bit better on Prize Picks. Currently, or I don't want to say currently, at least at this time, the release is 42.5 over under on Logano at Prize Picks. Based on our projection, he is a solid over there what they are projecting him at. So I'm going to be smashing the over on Logano. I think that that's a pretty solid play. Obviously, there's no gimmies in NASCAR, so we'll see how it plays out. But I like Logano a lot on both platforms. But I think I actually like his teammate, Ryan Blaney, a little bit more. 10-5, starting 11th. I've given him a 9.5. I know you're a little bit higher. I think this is the first 10 of the season. Why are you so heavy on Blaney this week?
Well, I've given him a 10 because he just barely missed getting into the top 5 of his group in the qualifying run. His teammate Joey Logano edged him out, so therefore he got to start 11th. So with that being said, he was there on the cusp of being one of the top cars to be in the qualifying run, could have got the pole. Instead, he's starting 11th, and we get that place differential upside. Obviously, he's in a position where we've seen him already lead laps this year. He can be a dominator easily. So much upside. I want to build almost all my cash lineups with him in the driver's seat.
And we're both on Blaney on the over as well on Prize Picks.
Go check that out in our race guide. Our race guide's got all of our Prize Picks overall. Also, we're going to touch on some of these drivers, but not every single one. We're trying to give you a condensed version of what we're witnessing and our thoughts going into this race. So it's kind of a digital magazine with some of the numbers that we're talking about, some of our core driver builds and the driver pool as well for our DraftKings contest. So the link below is in the comments. So check out this week's version.
Yeah, just because we don't talk about a particular driver does not mean that we like or dislike him for any reasons. We do the full impact scores for all of them, but there's only so much time, and on race day, there's a lot to get to. And when you're playing DraftKings and Prize Picks and some of these other sites that we like to play on, it takes a little bit of time to get everything in order. So we kind of help do all that for you. I think I'm really interested in this. We got this guy rated the same. I don't feel like we're going to have the same impression kind of about this guy, but I think he's going to be potentially the highest owned driver on the slate. Kyle Busch, 10-2. He starts 37th because in practice he backed his car, got loose, backed the car into the wall. They are going to a backup car like you mentioned earlier. To be honest, it was a poor backup car because it's basically a parts car. Had Hamlin's name on it. No wrap, no engine. That team, if they're able to get that car out and run well, that'll be a tip of the hat to that team to be able to pull it off in less than 24 hours, because that is a monstrous task by them. I am a little concerned about how good this car is going to be, because he will have no laps on this car dropping the green flag. We don't know what we're going to get. How concerned are you about Kyle Busch? Because obviously that's not price tag's not that bad when you're starting that far back. But are you worried about him having just a crap car?
If it was last year, probably. This year, I think the parity we've seen, you can be competitive, and him starting 37th with his price tag, I think, opens the door for him to be in a situation where you can really use him in almost any any environment,
right?
Because looking at the garage thoughts that you put together this week, he has got the highest top 10 percentage since 2018 on mile and a half tracks, like 80% almost. This guy gets the job done in these kind of races. I think he's going to be somebody.
He's also good at Las Vegas. 9 top 5s in his career.
It's his home track. He's going to really want to put on a performance. I think he's going to be a staple in a lot of winning lineups this week.
We're both at 9.5, by the way, after that rant. If you didn't tell, we do like him, but I am a little concerned about that, so I don't know exactly how heavy I'm going to be on him because of guys like Larson, Elliott, Logano, Blaney. They're expensive. They're going to more than likely lead laps, get fastest laps. But that PD, man, if he can get another top 15, top 10, he's going to be the highest one of the highest valued drivers on the entire slate. I think the next guy we need to talk about, man, I don't know what else this guy has to do to get a win. Tyler Reddick absolutely dominated the race last week. Just had a tire go down, and unfortunately, Willie B, I guess, didn't see him and really made matters worse. But, man, he was the class of the field. He's coming in this race. He's starting 7th, so they still got speed in this car. His teammate finished 2nd last week, 9,300. Where are you at on Tyler Reddick?
Man, Tyler Reddick's in an interesting position because he's ahead of a lot of these cars that have place differential upside, so he has a nice price tag to have a solid day because he can have a strong finishing position and potentially, we've seen him be fast, have the place differential, or I mean the laps led potentially, and then some fastest laps, and he's really got the performance points to have a solid day. So I want to have some exposure. I think he's more of a tournament play. I've given him an 8. I think he can find ways to have an impact.
Yeah, I'm at an 8.5. I do like Reddick a lot. I think it's not a matter of if, it's when he gets that win, that first career win. It should happen this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to get once he gets that first one, a couple more fall. He seems to have a lot of talent, and that team seems to really have just a good core around him. They're getting good fast cars, both him and Dylan. RCR's really turned that program around over the last few years. A lot to like about that whole group over there. But another guy that I think might be one of my highest owned drivers of this slate. He's not qualifying great for various reasons, but Kevin Harvick comes in at 9,100. He's starting 25th. I'm at a 9.5. This guy, let me just kind of break it down for you real quick. At Vegas, he is the number 1 driver according to driver rating over the last 8 races, 111.8 driver rating. He's got a win, averaging almost 57 laps led, almost 24 fastest laps. I mean, the dude is great. And then you look at what he's done on mile and a half since 2018, 42 races, and his top 10 percentage is 76%. Top 5 is over 50% in 42 races. That is crazy. So you're getting a great driver at Vegas. You're getting a great driver at mile and a half overall, and you're getting him starting 25th. Similar to Kyle Busch, these are some of the best mile and a half drivers on the circuit. If you're just going off of that sort of skill set, give me Harvick all day in this position here.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. I'm on a 9.5 with him because I think he has all the legitimate upside that you just talked about. And somebody right next to him in a very similar situation is Kurt Busch. He is 8,900 starting 31st. I've given him a 9.5 too because of a lot of the things that you just said. He's not the greatest here at this track, but he has a lot of success. And last week we saw him pass 1 million cars because of the situation he was put in. He has a fast race car. I think he can really do a good job this week at finishing strong like we saw last week. He had a little hiccup in his qualifying run. That's why he's starting back here. I think he has a lot of upside this week.
I absolutely do too. I'm at a 9, a little less than you. Yeah, just plug him in as one of your PD guys. I want to backtrack real quick. Kevin Harvick is also going to be one of my price picks plays this week. I like him at the over based on our projections and what they have him projected at 43.5. It's obviously no gimme, but our projections like him quite a bit on the over, so that's where I'm at on that. Kurt Busch is great. I think the next guy let's talk about is Brad Keselowski. We've definitely seen him a little bit differently this year. Starting 15th, 8,400. Great track history here. We know he can get it done at mile and a halves. Where are you at on Brad?
I like Brad this week. I think because of him starting 15th and that price tag at 8,400, he has a pretty solid path to value with similar situations with a couple drivers above him. But I think he's at a slight advantage because of the discount. I like him. I've given him an 8.5.
I'm at an 8 on Brad. He's in a position where he should finish a little bit higher up than that. A little bit of a discounted PD play. May go a little under-owned when you got guys like Kurt Busch, Harvick, Kyle Busch, who's got all this massive PD. So it might be a good pivot for him. someone I'm really curious. I don't know if I'm going to end up playing with him much in DraftKings or even Price Picks, maybe the under. I know you're going to like this next guy on the under. Christopher Bell, our pole sitter, 8,200, starting first. I'm at a 7 because some of these guys that we thought starting up front last week would just get freight trained, they didn't. They were very competitive. Maybe track position is all this guy needs. We know he's got talent. What do you think we're going to get out of Christopher Bell? Like, should we completely avoid him? Should we consider him? Where are you at on Bell?
I think he's fine in tournaments, but I like him over on Prize Picks with the under. They've got him at 44.5. I think he can get there, but it's going to be difficult because there's other guys behind him that have the ability to lead races. We've seen it in Austin Cindric already this year, Kyle Larson. So there's guys right there on his tail that can get out in front early and squash his day really quickly.
Penske guys.
So I've given him a 6 in that realm. So I really don't want to go heavy. You might sprinkle him in because he does have some upside to dominate this race. I just don't like it.
Austin Dillon, he was able to qualify 10th. He comes in 8,000. Was not really having that great of a day. I think he had to do some sort of pit pass through or something early in the race that really got him back in track position. The dude raced his way up to second after his teammate dominated the race last week. I think Austin Dillon's in play. I don't love it. I'd love more PD with him, but sometimes track position is all you need. He can get it done at mile and a halfs. I'm at a 7.
I'm at a 7 too. I think he's fine in tournaments. I don't want to have him in cash. I'd rather have the guy below him, Eric Almirola, 7,800, starting 20th. He's more of a cash game play for me. I've given him a impact score of 8. We talked about him and his consistency so far this year. We'll see if it continues, and he has some upside with place differential.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a 7.5, but I have a quick question for you. Again, I know this is super early in the race or early in the year, but if I told you, or if I asked you after 2 races, who do you think will have the most DraftKings points after those 2 races? How many guesses would it take you, would you have guessed, to get to Eric Almirola? Because he has 137.25 DraftKings points so far this year. The second guy is Bubba Wallace at 101.15, most of those coming from Daytona. Eric Almirola, he's been starting far back, so that PD has been really on his side. But how would you have guessed that?
No, never. And that's one of the things where 2 or 3 years ago we saw him pretty consistently on mile and a half, and we were able to lock him in. So if we can get dialed in on some of these metrics early and can find these little patterns, it'd be great.
All right, so I'm not the jury's still out, or the verdict's still out on Austin Cindric. He's the next guy we're going to talk about. 7,700. He starts 3rd. He's had a great start to the year. He's the only rookie to lead the point standings and Cup for more than one race. Much better start to the year than I thought he might have. I think at some point that comes back a little bit. I'm at a 6.5, but are you seeing a little bit more out of Cindric than I am?
If you want to take a shot at him being a dominator in a tournament play, do it. I'm at a 7 because I think he can find a way to lead laps. Already starting 3rd. If he has a clean day, man, he doesn't have to do a lot to hit a nice value point. I like him in the tournament, not cash.
And he is in a Penske car, and we've already praised the other 2 Penske teammates of his. We know they can get it done here. We know Brad got it done here in that 2 car. Obviously, it's a different car, same organization. I think he is a nice pivot in GPPs for a potential dominator, but I definitely would not go heavy. Someone I may go a little heavier on, though, is Eric Jones. One of the best cars last week besides Reddick. Up front most of the race. Finished the race up front. Starting 23rd, 7,300. He's got some PD upside. I'm at an 8. I don't know quite what we're going to get out of this organization throughout the year, but so far, he's looked good in just about every race that he's been in.
It's still early, but starting 23rd with that price tag, I think it's an all right price point for tournaments. I've given him a 7.5. I think you can really feel comfortable in rostering him in those environments. It's still early. We'll find out because Ricky Stenhouse, the guy below him, 7,200, starting 9th, looked fast last week. He looked fast this week. Man, I don't know how much I want to trust him. I've got a 6.5 because I want to still see if old Ricky can get this thing dialed in. If he's consistently here on this week, it's going to be fun to see if he and that team have found something.
Yeah, I think it was just a couple years ago he finished second or third at this race. And matter of fact, I think I had him in the lineup and it won me some decent amount of money. So I am a fan of Ricky here. I'm at a 7.5, but starting ninth, it is definitely risky. He is known as Recky Stenhouse for a reason. So take that with a, do with that with whatever you will. I mean, it is what it is. But he has looked fast. I think he's worth a shot in maybe a couple lineups if you're doing multiple. The same, I think, can be said for Chase Briscoe. And I would never have said this last year with him starting fourth unless it was at a road course track. 6,900, not a lot of salary. We saw him lead decent amount of laps last week. He seems to really be taking a step forward in this new car in his second year. It's still iffy. I'm at a 6.5. I like him less than I like, than some of these other guys, but I think he's worth a lineup or two.
Yeah, I think so too. A 6,400 starting or 6,900 starting fourth. I like him with that kind of happy medium in tournaments. 6.5 is where I'm at. Impact wise, I think he can lead some laps and do some things. He's somebody I liked coming up from the Xfinity Series. I wish he would have done a little bit more last year, but this year already you can tell he's a lot more confident. I am more confident too in him being in some of my rosters.
I think he's likely to be a force at a couple of these road courses race that we have later in the year. Maybe one coming up at COTA. We know he can get it done there, so it'll be really interesting to see how he's able to do. But I like his teammate as well, Cole Custer. He's had some good runs this year already. Looked much better than last year. Stewart Haas overall has just looked much more competitive than they did last year. I don't know if it was just kind of a lame duck year, what the story is, who knows. 7.5 for Custer because he's got way more PD than Briscoe's upside. But overall, I think he's a great play.
Yeah, I have 7.5. I think he has that place differential that you're looking for. Chris Buescher, the guy right below him on the salary board, 6,500 starting 27th, is pretty much a copy and paste situation for me. 7.5. He has a little bit of higher place differential, and we've seen them be fast. It's interesting to see how this one shapes out.
Yeah, I'm at an 8 on Buescher. I think I'm not quite sure what happened in his qualifying run. I think that's a much better car than 27th, so he should move up, barring any accidents. We only got a couple more drivers that we need to talk about for this show. One of my favorite guys again this week. He was in position to have a great finish until that last restart last week. His teammate, part-time teammate or whatever you want to call him, he was able to bounce back. That's Daniel Hemrick. But the organization is Colleague Racing, and this driver is Justin Haley. Starting 28th at 6,100, man, he's a much better car than that. If he can avoid the accidents this week, I think that's a top 20 car, possibly top 15. If that happens at that price tag, you're looking at well over 6X. I'm at a 9 on Justin Haley.
Yeah, I like him too. I'm at an 8.5. I think you can play him in any environment, and it makes sense with that price tag, that upside that he has with place differential. To me, it's a home run. I think there's only really one guy that I would feel comfortable below him playing, and he has place differential too. Ty Dillon. Last week, we talked about him and his consistencies over the years, being that he is one of the lowly priced guys every single week, and if he has a top 20 run, the dude pays off his value. So
he didn't even need a top 20 to hit over 5X this week.
He's at, if he hits a 22nd, man, you're over almost 5.5 at. That's a nice incentive to go ahead and go down to the basement this week. But that's about as low as I go, and I've given him a 7.5 with my impact score.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a 7 on Dillon. Yeah, you hit it. I mean, he's just been a consistent value guy for these, the cheaper price range. You can take a stab at some of these other guys, but as far as guys we feel real confident in, Ty Dillon, that is going to be the lowest that I want to go.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. This has been fun another week. It's like we said, we get to experience the qualifying and the practice before we get to sit down and do our impact scores and everything. So we feel this year we have a good, solid feeling of how things might play out. Of course, it's NASCAR. We got the next-gen car. There's a lot of things that play into it, but hopefully this content was relative to you, and if you liked what you saw, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out tremendously. Also, again, get in on the action. Drop your DraftKings tag below, and we'll send you that invite to get in. Jeremy, who do you have as the winner this week?
Long shot or just anybody?
Just take a shot.
If I have to put my money on one singular driver this week, I think I got to go Ryan Blaney.
I like Ryan Blaney too. I think he's somebody that is really in a nice position. Somebody I'll just take a shot at is also Denny Hamlin. I think Denny Hamlin could be somebody that flies under the radar. He just slipped a little bit in his qualifying run, so it's going to be fun to watch and see how he kind of gets this thing dialed in.
He won last time we were here.
Exactly. So I think he's somebody to watch as well. So if you want to check out all of our impact scores, that link is below with our race guide, so check that out. Again, this has been a lot of fun to get to do this. My name's Joe. That's Jeremy. This is the DK Garage, and we'll see you next time.